Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 18 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. We've got quite a bit going on the show today, so very excited about it. The interview is going to be with Erik Hollon, who's the head instructor of East Coast Martial Arts and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Annapolis in Annapolis, Maryland. But before we get to that, I've got a few other things to talk about, starting with this weekend, I went to my first Hoist Gracie seminar. Now, I've been a fan of Hoists for many years, starting with the first UFCs, and like many others out there, Hoist was what led me to pursue Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And over the years, I've had a chance to attend several Gracie seminars, and for whatever reason, just never got the opportunity to train with Hoist, attend one of his seminars. So finally did that this past Saturday, Chapel Hill Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Head instructor there is Mazi Hey Daddy, so shout out to him. And just really enjoyed the experience. It was great. He taught a lot of stand-up. Really was awesome just actually seeing and hearing and experiencing Hoist and his energy and participating in that seminar. So peak experience for sure. If you get a chance to do that and never have, certainly want to do that for yourself. Okay, in the last episode of the podcast, when I was talking about Chael Sonnen, I mistakenly said Metamoris 5 when it should have been Metamoris 4. I'm sure everybody knows about that or realizes that. But anyway, just want to let you know I am aware of that little mistake. And speaking of Metamoris 5, it was recently announced, the card for that show was recently announced, and that event's going to be happening November 22nd of this year. And headlining that event is going to be Kazushi Sakuraba versus Renzo Gracie. So that ought to be a really good match, good fight. Looking forward to that for sure. Everybody knows Sakuraba is considered the Gracie killer or Gracie hunter because he fought so many Gracies way back in the day, including Renzo, who refused to tap even when his arm got broken. So really looking forward to seeing that. The rest of the card is as follows. We have Rory McDonald against JT Torres, Yuri Simoes, and I'm probably butchering that last name. He's fighting Rafael Lovato Jr. And by the way, congratulations to Rafael Lovato Jr. for his MMA debut last Friday night, in which he got a first-round submission against his opponent and just really looked great. So congrats to him. We also have Vinny Magahales, and I know I'm butchering that last name, but everybody knows who Vinny is. So Vinny's going to be going against Kevin Casey. And then we also have Gary Tonin versus Zach Maxwell. And then, of course, the secret match that they recently started. including as well. So looking forward to that event. Again, November 22nd. Mark that on your calendars. Okay, today is Grandmaster Elio's birthday. He was born October 1st, 1913, and would have been 101 today. So I know people around the world are celebrating in their own way. A lot of schools are doing different special events or activities and everything. And I'd like to share a quote from Grandmaster Elio. "I would fight to prove that my art was good, to prove the jiu-jitsu I practiced was superior to other fighting arts. This was proven, therefore I'm happy that my life's mission was accomplished." Great quote. Also like to share a story from Chet Skimmerhorn about the late great Grandmaster.
Hi, my name's Chet Skimmerhorn, and my story today is one of my interactions with Grandmaster Elio Gracie while I was at the Torrance Academy doing some training. Back in the day, we had to fold towels. Basically, all the instructors did all the cleaning, everything that the academy needed so that it was preparing us to run our own academy. And so class is about ready to start one day, and I noticed that there's some towels that need folded, so I'm thinking, hey, some bonus points for me. I'll jump in, fold these towels, and then jump in class real quick. So I'm hurrying through the process of folding these towels and was not doing a very good job. And Grandmaster Elio walked by as I was almost finished. I think I had 2 towels to go of a good stack of these things. And he looked at them and knocked them all over. So basically I had to start refolding again. And, his point to me was the fact that any job worth doing, even the smallest job at any academy, is worth your full focus and your best work. And it was a very powerful thing for me. I missed part of the class because I was refolding, but yet at the same time there was towels for everybody when they got done for the shower. So just an interesting little story, kind of how he worked.
Okay, thank you, Chet Skimmerhorn, for that story about the Grandmaster. Okay, moving on. My guest today is Erik Hollon. And Erik is not only an awesome person, but a fantastic martial artist. And I know you're going to enjoy the interview, so let's meet him now. Okay, my guest today is Erik Hollon, head instructor of East Coast Martial Arts and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Annapolis in Annapolis, Maryland. So welcome, Erik. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right. So how are things been going for you lately?
It's pretty good, and we've been really busy. We had a pretty busy summer. We got all the kids coming back from, summer vacations, and so the classes are filling back up again, and it's going really good.
Awesome. Now, I met you, Erik, about 3 or 4 years ago out at the Gracie Academy in Torrance, California. And from that first time I met you, as well as all the times since then, I've had the chance to be around you. You've struck me as just this stand-up person, a person who really walks his walk, his martial arts walk, so to speak, and really lives that journey. So respect for that.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And talking about your journey, go ahead and fill us in on your background in the martial arts, how you got started, how that took you, where it took you, and how you ended up where you are today, Erik.
Well, I was lucky enough. My father was a black belt. He was one of the first Taekwondo black belts in America. He trained under the legendary Jun Rhee. Anybody from the Coast remembers Jun Rhee?
Oh, yeah.
The Nobody Bothers Me commercials. My dad was one of the first 2 guys that re-promoted up to the black belt level and helped open Rhee's first commercial school. He trained with him at the YMCA and all that other stuff. And that was, everything back then was all volunteer work, and he just did it for the love of it. And eventually went into the military, married my mom and all that stuff. And he kind of, he never pursued it as much afterwards. But when I was old enough to understand what was going on, we started training. At first, it was kind of like, it was a little bit more intense than like they talk about the Gracie kids growing up or whatever. But, he started teaching me some basic stuff and everything like that. And one part of the problem that we had was where we lived, and that was Annapolis when I was a kid. There weren't really any schools. I mean, it was a pretty dry area as far as training. It was very hard to find. You kind of had to know somebody. So he trained me at home. My parents eventually split up, but right around the time they split up, he found a Taekwondo school for me to train at, and it was through kind of like Park Rec at this place called Maryland Hall. And so I started training there with a guy named Wes Whitelock, who now works with me here at East Coast Martial Arts years later. And I got my black belt through Wes and Grandmaster Cha, who was in Rockville, Maryland at the time, just outside of D.C. And in the meantime, I studied with everybody I could. I lucked into having a teacher at my school who was an Aikido black belt, and I trained with him for a while. I had friends who were brown belts in Ishinryu. We just kind of banged around a little bit. There was a Kempo school in the area, and, I kind of went around, sparred with them. And then I got into Olympic Taekwondo through my Taekwondo school. And so I never had a real job in high school. What I would do is I would go to different schools. I would spar with the guys, and everybody was interested in doing the Olympic. And then I would just do private lessons. So
nice.
While my wife, who was then my girlfriend, was working 30, 40 hours a week at McDonald's or whatever, I was making close to the same amount sometimes, teaching private lessons. So it was a lot of fun not having an adult job.
Yeah, that's great, man.
So I went in the military. My wife and I got married. And when I was living in California, I was teaching Taekwondo at a local school. And there was a guy there named Vince Perez Mazzola, who had come up from the Inasano Academy in L.A. and trained with the legendary Dan Inosanto, was an instructor under him, and was just teaching a Muay Thai class, which I had a lot of interest in. I had done a little bit of it before, but Vince was a fantastic instructor and really got me interested and started showing me some of the other JKD stuff. And, of course, I jumped all over that, and then eventually started, made a couple of trips down to L.A. and then found out that Dan Inosanto also did a lot of seminars all over the country. And so I kind of got hooked into that network. Everywhere I traveled, I tried to find a JKD or Inasano curriculum school. Every place, if he was within, I would say probably if he was within 200 miles of Annapolis when I was coming up, then I would, I'd go to a seminar there, and I try and spend the whole weekend and do the seminar. And so I did probably, I'd say 4 to 5 seminars a year with him for about 7 or 8 years. So. And
That's awesome.
Same thing with Ajahn Chai, who is the Muay Thai master instructor.
Yep.
So, and then
that's great.
Then a little bit, I found Renzo Gracie, had his school, and so I did a couple of seminars with him. I bought his whole video series. I got my friends to help me learn some of the jiu-jitsu through that, and so that's some of the basics. I did more of my grappling through Inosanto's curriculum with shoot wrestling and Eric Paulson and all that other stuff, and so. But once I found when they launched Gracie University, I saw before it even came out, I started seeing them promoting it, and I had already started working at East Coast Martial Arts right around 2001, 2002, and I told Tommy Lee, the owner, I said, "This is the coolest thing ever. You got to see this video curriculum. It's beyond anything we've ever seen." And so yeah, we got in on it, and as soon as they offered the instructor program, and once they opened it up the enrollment to it, I enrolled in it, and that's where you and I met.
Wow, that's a great journey. I know that's the short version,
yeah.
But you've certainly had a lot of different kinds of martial arts exposure and experience. That's really cool. I'm a huge fan of Dan Inosanto, and everybody I know, anybody that's aware of him or when you hear his name, it's always held in high regard. He's absolutely awesome. I did a little Taekwondo as well way back in the day, just for about a little over a year. And mainly I'd moved to this new school. I moved to this new town, and I'd been doing Kempo, and they had Shaolin Kung Fu, and they had Taekwondo. And I hung out more with the Shaolin Kung Fu guys, but I'd never competed in martial arts, and I kind of wanted to do that. So I went over to the Taekwondo school and did about 4 competitions inside a year, and had a lot of fun doing that. I was never very flexible or, really good at the high kicks or anything like that. The flashy stuff, pretty short and pretty stiff.
Mm-hmm.
But coming from Kempo, I had a decent, handwork. So that kind of carried me through because, as you know, in Taekwondo, at least oftentimes that's not emphasized as much, the handwork. But I never did any of the Olympic style. I think that's pretty cool because you get into more of the, the power there.
Right. Well, it's highly, highly specialized. So
yeah.
I always say, and I think, even Joe Rogan said this on his podcast, Taekwondo stylists are doctorates in kicking and white belts in hand techniques and everything. But it's an interesting blend because I think there's a lot of truth to the way Dan Inosanto teaches, which is that, styles are artificial and that a system exists only because at some point they said, okay, this is everything that we can teach. This is kind of our dogma. This is what we're going to teach. And, this is what we're going to maybe specialize in. Maybe not intentionally, but that's eventually what happens. And so Taekwondo, to try and, I think, especially with the Olympic stuff, to differentiate themselves from karate, they really started changing the rules to kind of make it mold and shape to making it more distinct, so that you could tell the difference between a karate match and a Taekwondo match. And so the rules were formed to emphasize the kicking with no punches to the head and everything like that for the Olympic style. So that,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then going back to the JKD, very similar to you, I got into some of that and just loved it because way back before, MMA or at least the modern day MMA or anything like that was around, they were one of the first schools of thought, if you will, involving all the ranges and things like that of fighting. And that was some of my first exposure to submission grappling or grappling was through that as well. I did it for a long time without any kind of gi or any kind of gi training as far as grappling. It was just, no gi, what you can do in a fight, that kind of thing. So it was pretty cool.
Right. And it's amazing, even now teaching classes at Fight Sim and stuff like that, how people will talk about having the gloves or having the gi or having the gi and no gloves or no gi and gloves, and how every little detail changes it. So I was trying to express it to my students. I said, everything is about the training method. So unless you're just going to go out, a la Fight Club and pick a fight on the street, you can only ever simulate combat, because anytime you put even one rule in there, it's not really combat anymore. It's training method. So, people talk about, I don't like doing the gi because of, somebody can grab my collar, but then it evens out because you can do that to them as well. For the Fight Sim, it's funny to me how my brand new guys, they just get their blue belt and the first time they have the gloves on, they're so scared of getting hit that they don't remember that if, they're both wearing gloves in the drill, that they're allowed to hit too.
Right.
That completely goes out the window. They just go into complete survival mode, which is fine, as long as they're learning something from it.
Right.
But, and then changing up. And when you use the boxing gloves, it's funny to me how it becomes so apparent to them that they have to stay punch safe and they go back to their combatives and they do a much better job. But when they have the smaller, the Vale Tudo style gloves on, it's kind of you probably experienced this too when we were in Destin. Were you there for the instructor day in Destin?
Yeah, I was.
And we did the thing where, everybody had the small sparring gloves and the gi, which I don't know why that never occurred to me, but I'd never done that before. I was I kept finding myself oh, right, I can hit now. Or I would be striking and I go, oh, right, I can grab a sleeve or a collar or whatever.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah. Definitely increases your awareness of everything involved.
Right. So, one of the things I learned training with Inosanto and all of his guys and everything was that, embrace the training method from each of the systems, but don't be bound by it, and see how you can take something that might be a stick fighting training method, a collie training method, and adapt it to groundwork or stand up or integrating everything together. And I think that was what he gave me the most, was that I never look at something as okay, here's this drill and this is the only way to do this.
That's big, man. That's really big.
Yeah, I think it's really the opposite. I think I look at stuff and I go, okay, this is a good base point to work from, and where can we take this? How can I evolve this? How can I make this better for the students?
And that's a really great great way to look at things, and I think more people should adopt that kind of mindset instead of get locked into the dogma of what they started in or got exposed to or are currently in. We call it drinking the Kool-Aid.
Right.
So Dan Inosanto really modeled that when he reached out and started studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, I know people who train with him will tell you this too, that in the 2000s and everything, he had really embraced it, and he was training with Jean-Jacques Machado and I think Hegan for a while, and a lot of different people, and I know Rickson Gracie was going to Inosanto Academy and training with Erik Paulson and vice versa and everything, and he has a great. I was lucky enough to be training through him and under him during that time. He had a great love for it, and kind of his love for all of that stuff is infectious, and so especially watching him embrace the jiu-jitsu game was it kind of made me, it inspired me to kind of pursue it as well.
Great. What a great influence on many, many people's lives as well as yours. So what about your family, Erik? Do they are they involved in jiu-jitsu and or martial arts?
Well, my wife and I always joke that I married into a ballet family and she married into a martial arts family. So, all of my kids have done ballet because my mother-in-law has owned a studio for 30 years, more than that, really. She's taught ballet professionally, and all of her daughters, including my wife, did ballet. So my daughters, it was kind of predestined. But I even had my son do it when he was younger, and then the deal was that as long as he was old enough to make his own decision, we would honor whatever that was. And we got to be about 5 or 6 years old. He kind of was done with the ballet thing, but the problem was that we didn't really have a place to train because we were bouncing around at the time. He was very young. We weren't really living in any one place for more than a year. And when he turned about 9 was when I found East Coast. And I always say, I can always remember when I started here because his first intro lesson was supposed to be on 9/11, and that was one of the calls I made that day. I was like, all right, we're not coming in. And
wow.
And so it was about 3 days later we came in for his intro. It was something that I was going to put off longer, but I wanted to kind of normalize for him because, everybody, he was, like I said, 9 years old. It was very stressful, emotional time for everybody, and especially kids who really didn't understand what was going on and everything. So I kind of brought him in here and we did an intro, but it was funny because we had done some playing around and some training and stuff like that. And he knew how to throw some kicks, but he got really nervous the day before we were actually going to go in. And so he's like, can you show me some stuff? So yeah, we went down to the basement. I still had pads from when I was training my friends and stuff like that. And it was supposed to be like 20 minutes, and then we were going to be an hour, and then it wound up being about 2.5 hours. And
wow.
And, he did really well. It was one of those things. It was the first thing I had seen him athletic, kind of. And, he was always a big kid as far as he was always taller than everybody else in his age group and kind of gangly and everything, and a little pudgy at the time. And he started to do really well. And we went in for the intro, and the guy who did the intro lesson didn't believe that Zach had never taken a class, and so when he came in for the second one, that's when I met Tommy, who owned the school. And so we started talking, and Tommy's actually starting a Muay Thai class just for the instructors. And I was like, well, I do some Muay Thai. And, I'm never one of these guys like, well, I list my martial arts resume when I go to a school. I'm not trying to be coy or anything, but I always hate it when I hear that from other people. They always want to,
right.
They always want to tell you what they know, and instead of listening to what, you're going to offer them. So yeah,
that's so true.
We did an intro with Tommy, and we talked a little bit, and he invited me to come in. And so the way I got started at the school was, I came in, and the guys were mostly Taekwondo guys some of them had some kickboxing experience. Tommy had a lot of kickboxing experience, and we had a small class, and I was the only one that came in wearing Thai shorts, and had real Thai pads and everything. And I walked in, and I was kind of like, this is, I wasn't really expecting a traditional Muay Thai class, but they were all looking at me like, what was this? So I took the first class.
You're like, wait, what?
Yeah. So the running joke has always been, I took the first class, we co-taught the second class, and by the third class, it was more or less my class. So I started teaching Azure and Chai's curriculum and everything. And then there was another instructor here, Chris Chase, who's a longtime good friend of mine now. And Chris came to me right away and said, oh, I saw you wearing an Inosanto Academy shirt. So we were talking about that. So yeah, I started teaching Chris, and then that turned into like 4 or 5 other people, and then Chris had some jiu-jitsu experience, so that was again where I kind of got back into doing the ground stuff. So yeah, it was a good time. I mean, we evolved from there. I was part-time here. I owned a moving company at the time and working like 60, 70 hours a week, but was looking to maybe sell my share in the company. And around the time that I was getting really serious about trying to find a buyer, Tom was talking about hiring somebody full-time, like a head instructor. And, so it kind of was just kismet. And so sold my share in the company. It took like 2 or 3 months off and then came on full-time school.
Right on. And the rest is history.
Yeah.
Now, going back to the ballet for a moment, did your wife pull you into the ballet arena?
I actually, the joke was when we were still dating, she actually suckered me into going in on one performance because we were messing around and she was showing me this jump called a torjete. And at the time I was, super taekwondo athlete guy. And I was like, I can do that, And at the time I had like a 40-some inch, vertical leap. So
yeah,
she tried to get me to perform, and then I chickened out or whatever. But they got me on stage as more or less like a prop, and so I did my penance.
That's cool. That's cool. So. And I can joke a lot about it, but in reality, it's really good for you, for anybody. I mean, even Arnold Schwarzenegger took it back in the day. So hey, can't be too bad, right?
Yeah. Well, it was fantastic for my son. It built a baseline of strength and flexibility for him. So
right.
When he
right.
started training, Zach, by the time he was grown and everything, he was, right now he's 6'3", he's probably about 210 right now. But when Zach fights, he moves like a lightweight, and he's incredibly flexible, very fast, very, great footwork and everything like that. And I attribute a lot of that to early training in ballet. So I don't put it down at all. And I'm amazed by what my daughters could do, when they were coming up through there. Just the athletic skill of all of it. Even though I saw it develop, I was just, I'd go to recitals and I would see them in practice and not really think anything of it. But I go to recitals and see the dudes just dumbfounded,
Yeah, yeah, certainly. It sure instills a lot of great attributes, flexibility, athleticism, agility, all that. So good stuff. So what about your time off the mat, Erik? What do you like to do? Do you have time to do anything besides martial arts? And if so, what do you like to do besides?
Yeah, I'll let you know if that ever actually happens.
All right.
The school's pretty much a full-time job. I do like doing some stuff. Like I played golf for a long time. One of my wife's great birthday presents to me one year was when the kids were really young, she got a job at a golf course. It's a fantastic golf course near us called Queenstown. And so as a result, I got to play golf for free for like 3 years and she would only work there like 4 hours a week or whatever as a cart girl. But so when it was free, I played all the time. Once she stopped having a job and I had to pay for it, I didn't like it as much. So
yeah, suddenly changed everything.
Right. But, to be honest, I do what I love for a living. So it kind of looks depends on how you look at it because, I come to work and I play, the flip side of that is I'm never really on vacation because whenever I have a chance to go on vacation, I always pick to go do something and train. So, but at the same time, I enjoy doing it. Destin is, my favorite week of the year. I'm so glad they started doing that, and this year I actually got my wife to go and now, it was like pulling teeth the first 2 years to try and get her to go. And then this year she went, loved it, and she's already planning out next year. So,
yeah, it is a pretty awesome time for sure. And a great family vacation built in. So you can't go wrong. But like you said, when you do, your passion, when you love what you do and do what you love, man, you can't go wrong.
Yeah. So. I have a good friend of mine who's my training partner, Bill Carditzis. And Bill we're here in Annapolis, so the Naval Academy is right here. Bill's the shooting instructor at the Naval Academy. So, he's kind of near the top of his profession, And we've had a lot of conversations about that, how we've both been lucky to do the thing that we love the most. Bill's a fantastic shooting instructor. Obviously, he's had that job for 15 years or something like that. And again, at the very top of his profession and loves doing it, loves going to work. And even, anything that he has to deal with, the red tape with the Navy and the government and everything like that is small in comparison to the rewards he gets from it. And, I feel the same thing about what I do. Anybody who's taught martial arts professionally knows that one of the hardest things is, like, if you teach kids and you have to deal with their parents who don't train and you have to kind of educate them, that's one of the hardest things to do. And it can be very frustrating, especially if you're not prepared for it, and I've been lucky enough, good mentors here for all of that, and it continues to be one of the most challenging parts of my job. But at the same time, it's one of the most important parts, because it doesn't do the kids any good if you train the kids and then it doesn't get reinforced at home, or it doesn't get, modeled at home, So I engage the parents and I tell them, I say, use the terminology we use here. We have a game that we call focus time. It's basically you're teaching kids how to do meditation, like you would in a traditional martial arts school. And I said,
right.
I said, if the kids are going bonkers at home, play focus time with them. And no matter what, it calms them down for that moment, and it'll calm them down for a little bit afterwards. So it gives you a nice little break or whatever. So it's very engaging. And the same thing, especially for, there's a lot of great stuff. Henry always comes up with great, terminology and little skits to do with them, like, hey, hamburger head and all that other stuff. Everybody's used that.
Right.
And so, I tell the parents, I was like, do that stuff with them at home. So that's not just something that they do in this building once or twice a week.
Exactly.
Yeah, that it becomes a part of their culture, for their family and for their home and everything. And then it's something that when it does happen, it's not like, oh, right, I should have done this. It's something that they already do. So.
That's so important. That's so important. So I'm really glad you're emphasizing that. And just take, for example, what you said about the focus time. Mm-hmm. In a day and age and a culture that really de-emphasizes being able to focus and sit, just sit and be okay with not running around doing something, at least for a few minutes. Our cultures, our kids are basically, wired and wide open so much of the time. And a lot of them have lost the ability or never had the ability to just sit and kind of focus. And if you can get them to do that in one area, that's going to carry over and enable them to focus in many other areas in life when they need to. So that's so important.
It really is. I mean, think about, not to get too old fart syndrome, but when we were all growing up, it's the cliche is, we went outside and we played and we did this and this and we didn't have 500 cable channels. And
right.
But the way I look at that as a parent is it's a challenge, because your kids are growing up in a completely different culture than you grew up in. And so you have to adjust it. You can't use what your parents used with you. Obviously, they didn't use what their parents used with them. And,
right.
Hopefully anyway. But the arrogance of parenting when you first started, is usually like, oh, I got this. I know what I'm going to do. Either that or you have abject terror about it. And I always try to keep that.
Or sometimes both
right,
at different times.
Right. And I always try and keep that in mind when I'm talking to parents. I don't ever want to come off as condescending or whatever, but for the most part, my kids are all grown. My youngest is 17 and just graduated from high school. So I've raised my kids, my wife and I have raised our kids already. And so I have that perspective of, I know what you're going through, but more than that, I know what you're about to go through. And then I've also been teaching kids for 12 years. So I want them to understand that, I empathize with it. And you have to look at it not from your kid's perspective. You have to be able to understand that their perspective is completely different than yours. So it's impossible for you to look at it from their perspective. You didn't have iPads. You didn't have an iPhone. You didn't have access to all the knowledge in the world, in a small device in the palm of your hand. So it's a huge challenge for parents and
for sure.
So, my kids were already teenagers when all that stuff started coming out. Yeah.
And mine are still pretty young. I have a boy that's 9.5 and a girl that just turned 6. So I'm definitely in that time frame of enjoying technology and the different changes in modern society, but also, seeing the negatives or the potential negatives and having to kind of deal with that and try to keep that balance for me as well as for them. So it certainly is an interesting situation. So let's switch gears for a second, Erik. And if you could train with someone or anyone, living or deceased, who would that be and why?
Well, I was thinking about this. I was going to tell you ought to pre-frame the question sometime for all the rest of the CTC guys that come up, because everybody says Elio, because a lot of us, he'd already stopped training by the time we got into it. So obviously Elio. Holds Gracie is, again, like a lot of guys, I'm kind of obsessed with the idea of having been able to train with Holds, because he seems to have influenced so many people, including Hickson. And Hickson, I guess, would be the number one living. Hickson and Crone, Gracie would both be two of the living ones that I'd love to train with. There's also a guy named Roy Dean, who I think a lot of your listeners are familiar with.
Yeah, big fan.
I find that guy fascinating. He has on his website there's a blog, I guess, and it's more or less it's a book about his time like living in Japan as a uchideshi, which is like a live-in student, and and it's just a fascinating. If you watch his jiu-jitsu, it's so, to me, having done Aikido, so clearly influenced by his Aikido, and he's got this beautiful jiu-jitsu, and he trained with Roy Harris, who I think is maybe one of the top jiu-jitsu instructors of all time as far as being able to teach who's, out of the guys whose last name aren't Gracie.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of obsessed with some of the stuff that he does as well. I've got, most of his instructional stuff on my phone.
I like his BJJ over 40 for sure.
Right.
DVD. Yeah.
So yeah, Elio Knowles and then Hickson Cron, like I said, Roy Dean. Roy has come to the East Coast, and it's always on some weekend where there's no possible way I can go to his seminar. It's happened like 3 times now.
Yeah, and he's out in Oregon, right?
Yeah. He's about as physically far away as he can get from me.
Exactly.
And still be in the continental United States. And I have no other reason to go out to Oregon, so I would have to manufacture a reason to go out there. So
yeah.
But those are the main ones. But to be honest, I feel really fortunate that I do get to train with 2 of the guys that I've said this before, that I feel lucky that we get to train with Henner and Hiron, both of them, because I really do feel like I was having this conversation with Mike Stewart a couple of months ago, and we were talking about how I really feel like they're like the future of jiu-jitsu, for all of the flack that they seem to get from some of the older guys and everything like that. It looks to me like everybody is just following their suit now. I look at, Gracie University came up and everybody trashed it and everything like that. And then everybody saw what an effective tool it was and what an effective method of training, teaching, and conveying knowledge. And now everybody's got an online training course. And not only that, the online training courses seem to be patterned after Gracie University now, to the point where I'll be using some of the same software format, everything like that. So, I looked at Marcelo Garcia in action, and if you look at the older videos, they're under one pattern, and then some of the newer ones seem to be a little bit more like the Gracie University format. I don't know if that's on purpose. I'm just saying that
right.
I think truth is truth, and when you see something good, instead of fighting against it or railing against it, you're much smarter, just like you are in jiu-jitsu, to go with it and go with the better method. We've all experienced that rolling. You sit there and you think, I want to, whatever, you want to get this arm bar or whatever. And if the arm bar doesn't present itself, then go for something else. And
yeah, you're right. And it's interesting to see how that's developed, though. When something initially comes out, it's met many times with a lot of resistance, and then all of a sudden people see, whoa, that's. They either think that's good stuff, or hey, that works. That mode of delivery works. So then they embrace it. Like I know Rafael Lovato Jr. and Kyle Tierra, they all have their online programs, and they also have where you can have a school, even as a blue belt, be a coach, and that caught a lot of flack at first as well. So a lot of people are moving towards that. So always under their guise, of course.
Well, what I found interesting about that is a lot of the guys who went online trashed the idea and saying, you can't have a school run by a blue belt and all this other stuff. I've been to some of those schools, and I watched the beginner classes. Beginner classes are taught by blue belts in most of those schools. Not necessarily the ones you mentioned, but a lot of the ones I saw online.
Sure.
Especially locally, guys on the East Coast who were the first ones to come out and say, that's ridiculous and this and that, and you have to have a black belt there and everything, and go and see. How do you see a black teaching a beginner class in Jiu-Jitsu Academy? It's almost non-existent. In my experience, it has been. So, a lot of times it was a blue belt or, maybe a purple belt teaching beginning classes and everything. And so, I got to say, when I started with the CTC, I kind of bristled under that criticism until I started seeing everybody else was doing the same thing. They just weren't advertising that they were doing it. They weren't owning up to it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And the instructor course, and this, the instructor course that we went through is so rigorous and so complete and everything like that. And because it is really just, especially when you get out, you're just certified to teach combatives and bully proof. And you're more than capable of doing that at that point. You've already mastered that curriculum to
Absolutely.
the point of being able to teach another beginner how to do it. So,
And as you progress, you increase your knowledge and bring them with you. But a lot of people didn't realize that. They thought that, you're holding yourself up, as a blue belt coach or instructor as knowing as much as a black belt, which has certainly never been the case or wasn't the intention or anything like that by any means.
Right. And it's just, you're introducing people to the art. And
Exactly.
I see that the criticism seems to be going down now that all of the people that have been training at CTCs are showing up at other people's jiu-jitsu seminars, and they're getting to make money off of the people who are training at CTCs also. It seems to me like the criticism has gone down a little bit. You know, we were talking at Destin, you know, Frank Cucci, who I greatly admire.
Absolutely.
Martial artist, and I think anybody who's heard his name knows who he is. You know, he came up at Destin and he got his one of his promotions or whatever. He took the BBS1 test, and he said, man, if the rest of the curriculum is going to be like the BBS1, the Blue Belt Stripe 1, the purple belts are going to be nightmares, you know. And to come from Frank Cucci, who's you know, one of the first guys to get a legit black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu here in the States, everything. I mean, that's a huge endorsement to me, and it was just something casual that he was saying. He wasn't trying to, you know, make a point or anything like that. But
Right.
I think I think the curriculum is really phenomenal. And I tell you, that BBS1 test was one of the hardest tests I've ever taken in martial arts in many, many years, and many, many tests in the martial arts. So.
Oh man, me too. For one stripe, man, it was like, right. Oh my God. And I understand some of the resistance and what I consider maybe the only legitimate criticism of the Gracie online program is testing online, which you and I know what it's really about and how hard that is and how it's not an easy way to do things by any means. But I can understand outsiders who embrace that, okay, the online instruction is really quality, but you shouldn't be able to test on, you know, and they've made changes to reflect that, to upgrade that. So at this point, I don't see a whole lot that people could have a problem with on it. But like I said, the other very high level martial arts instructors and Caltiera and others have done the same thing now, so that you don't test online, but you certainly can learn online, and then they'll come around and check you and fill in gaps and that kind of thing. All right, so do you have a favorite quote or motto that inspires you or that you live by, Erik?
I have a constant rotating favorite quote. You know, one of the ones we use here for the school for our competition team, for our Taekwondo competition team, is, I want to say it comes from Tony Robbins, but it's, if you can't, then you must. And I always think about how that kind of jives with what Hiron always talks about with, you know, if you force yourself to train in uncomfortable positions, you'll cease to have uncomfortable positions. And so I always think now, you know, whenever my gut reaction to something is, I don't like that, or I don't want to do that, or whatever, the next thing is, well, now I have to, you know, I have to. If you know, I don't like leg locks, then I got to really train leg locks. If, you know, for me, when it first started and I was kind of, you know, leading the training and everything, and we would roll, what I would do is, because I had a little bit more ground skill than the guys I was going with, was I would always force my top game on them. And I started to realize that every time I got on the bottom, I got reversed, I would panic, or I would have a problem, or I have an issue, or whatever. And so I started to think, all right, here's what I need to do. Because I was really influenced by the first time we went and trained with Hiron. It was down at Bill Odom's school in Norfolk. We did a seminar there, and that was one of the things he said. He goes, Hiron told a story about living with Elio, you know, that famous story that Henry was just talking about, where instead of college, he went and lived with Elio for a year or 2 years or whatever it was. And Hiron told a story at the seminar about going and his grandfather enrolling him, registering for a tournament, a jiu-jitsu tournament in Brazil, and didn't even tell him. He just like, they were on their way. He's like, oh yeah, register you for this tournament. We're going to go fight in this tournament. And he says, your mount escapes are horrible, so I want you to let everybody mount you. And Hiron said that the point system had gotten to the point where nobody wanted to mount because you got something like 6 points for reversal on a mount. So he said at one point he would just lie on his back and like literally pull the people on top of him so that he would have to mount him, you know, everything. But, you know, the point of that being that I thought, you know, I don't like being on the bottom, even though I can maybe, you know, knowing a little bit more than these guys can get out. I don't like being on the bottom. So what I decided was I'm just going to be on the bottom of every fight until it doesn't bother me anymore. And in fact, until I kind of prefer it, you know, and so that's what I did. You know, my toughest goals were always with my friend Bill. He was picking the stuff up really fast. He's incredibly athletic and everything, and strong guy. And so every time we rolled, I would never try to take top position. I would take it if it was there or whatever, but for the most part, I never tried to take top position. And I just forced myself to learn how to fight on the bottom, mostly on my back on the bottom. And, you know, and the result is that I have a much better bottom game to the point where I prefer it. And I have a student, Jim Callahan, who also went through the ICP, and he and my other student, Steve Ziegler, who you met, both of those guys. They're always with me at all of these things. And Jim used to, we used to tease him because he got caught in triangle a lot. But I told the whole class one time, I said, you guys tease him now, but eventually Jim will be the only guy here you will never be able to catch in a triangle because he'll have seen more of them than anybody else.
Right.
And that's the truth now. It's like, he doesn't mind get put in triangle guard setup now because he knows 50,000 escapes and he's got more experience getting out of them than you have putting him into it. So, and Steve had some challenges with his shoulder and everything like that. So Steve's ability to pass to either side is diminished because of that. But as a result, he knows every single way to pass to that one side because he's forced to have to do that. So,
right.
So there's a great quote by, I want to say it's Epictetus. It's the obstacle is the way, that thing that you butt up against all the time, that's your salvation. Yeah. That's that thing. That's the thing that's going to help you evolve.
So true. So true. Well, great insight, great sharing. I appreciate that. And in wrapping up, Erik, tell us what's been the biggest impact in your life from Gracie Jiu-Jitsu?
I'll tell you, the thing is you paid me a nice compliment in the beginning about how I walk the walk in my martial arts life. And that's really what I found in the Gracies. Like the whole thing was that their entire life's culture is built around being a warrior. And the word gets thrown around a lot, everything like that. But those guys, they stand up for what they believe in. They always, I've trained with martial arts instructors my whole life where, at some point you're a little disappointed that they're not really doing what you're telling them to do. And that's never the case with those guys. Huron and Henner are exactly who they look like they are. They are incredibly disciplined, very fair, balanced. They're gentle guys and everything like that, even though they have this ability to, just about smash any human being on the face of the earth through their skill and everything like that. But they are really the modern day expression of a samurai or whatever. I mean, as corny as that may sound. So really it's the culture of the Gracies and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu that I've embraced even more than the techniques. And I love the techniques. I'm one of these guys that will get really caught up in the technical minutia of stuff because I love that part. That's one of the things that appeals to me about any martial art. But more than that, everything, the Gracie diet, the culture, the culture on the mat, to keep it playful, and to keep it real at the same time. And the whole thing together, it's a way to live your life that to me it's correct. It's positive.
Well said. And I couldn't agree more. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time today, Erik, and your insight. You're a true motivator and a true inspiration. So thank you so much and keep changing lives, brother.
Thank you very much, Marty. It was my pleasure.
And you can find out more about Erik and East Coast Martial Arts / Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Annapolis by visiting their website at www.eastcoastmartialarts.com. Okay, time for our Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Today the segment is being done by Clay Mayfield. And Clay is a purple belt under Royce Gracie, big-time competitor, competes all over the world, and very knowledgeable person. I will be having him on the show at a later date for a full interview as well. So here's Clay.
I wanted to share an approach that I've been considering a lot lately, and that's seeking the intent behind the action. I think of comprehension as having 3 levels. The first is knowledge, the second wisdom, and the third and deepest level being understanding. The knowledge is the what, the wisdom is the how, and understanding is the why. So knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, the what, the how, and the why. And you'll find this in the teachings of the great Greek philosophers, in the book of Proverbs, in ancient Buddhist writings. This is no new concept. I can know what and how someone is doing something, but until I grasp the intent behind the action, the why, true understanding of what's going on eludes me. For example, let's say Henner is teaching me Americana from the mount for the first time. As he demonstrates it, I can see what I need to do, knowledge. As he positions my hands and talks me through the technique, I start to grasp how to do it. Wisdom. But it may not be until someone actually escapes my Americana that I understand, oh, that's why I roll the wrists, to stop the arm from straightening out. Once I understand the why, the rest of the pieces start to fit together and sink in. I try to look at daily interactions the same way. For example, let's look at the act of eating. The purpose of eating, the why, is to nourish our bodies. When we understand that, it changes the way we view the action as a whole. We can start to make diet choices based on nutrition rather than simply taste. Another situation would be if someone has said or done something that's off-putting to me. I seek to understand intent behind their actions. And what I find is there's usually not intentional insult or maliciousness. Most often it's simply a lack of awareness, a miscommunication, something they meant to come across a different way. And it's key to understand why they're doing what they're doing. So 3 levels of comprehension: knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. The what, the how, and the why. Whether it's a position in jiu-jitsu, choosing organic foods over genetically modified foods, a business transaction, or a simple conversation, I seek to understand intent behind action.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the show. As always, thanks again for tuning in. I do appreciate the support, and keep the comments coming on what you like about the show, anything that you think should be different, and any suggestions you have for interviews. Please like us on Facebook as well as Twitter. On Twitter, we're at GJJRocks. Please rate us on iTunes, as well as visit our website at www.graciejujitsurocks.com. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.